Okay, well, welcome to everybody that's joining and certainly joining us on video tomorrow. This is the first time that Havant Civic Society have ever attempted to run an online hustings. In fact, I'm not sure the last time, if ever, that we've actually run a hustings in St Faiths. So this is all a bit of an experiment, and we'll just have to see how it goes. I should remind you that I am recording this, obviously, but from a GDPR viewpoint, I really ought to tell you that I'm recording it. Just to introduce ourselves, I'm Bob Comley, Chair of Havant Civic Society. We have Christopher Evans, our planning representative, waving his hand there. He's the man who scours the weekly planning lists for topics of interest for us. Vernon Stradling, who has appeared now, he's finished his dinner. Vernon is our treasurer, and Peter Hammond, also known as the Spring here.
Sorry about that. If I could get rid of that, I would.
Peter Hammond is our vice chair. Not able to be with us tonight is Anne Buckley, who is the coordinator of the Havant Borough Residents Alliance. She's co-opted to the HCS committee for her untiring efforts with the Gazebo Garden volunteer gardeners. So, as a welcome to those guests that are here, Mark and Chris in spirit. I haven't seen you in the waiting room yet, no. And all of our members and the great beyond in St Faiths, who hopefully will join us via YouTube after this event. Sadly, I have to say to Chris and Mark that neither of your questions actually made it into the final selection for tonight. However, we do have a plan. There are, out of the questions that we had, there are 3 that were left over that were of interest. We're going to put those up on the screen at the end of the session, and we would welcome the candidates having a look at those and responding to them via comments on YouTube when the video's up. We'll leave that up to you to think about, but there are 3 extra questions. So let's hope the technology behaves itself. Very warm welcome to all 4 candidates. Now, in order to focus your attention and along the way to answer some of the duplicate questions that we had from quite a few people, we've asked you to cover a specific brief in your introduction. And for the benefit of those viewing, I shall read it out. What we've asked you to do, and you've had good notice of this, you have up to 2 minutes to introduce yourselves, time in which we'd like you to include the following information. 1, why you have decided to stand in this election. 2, what other roles you currently perform and how much of your time will you be able to give to the role of Havant Borough Councillor. 3, what makes you qualified to represent St Faiths residents. And 4, what do you believe to be the main issues facing Havant Borough today? Please bear in mind that this is a local election focused on local issues that local government has the power to address. We already hear enough about your party's national policies through the national news media, so please don't waste the time you have by simply throwing in quotes and catchphrases from national campaigns. Remember, we're local. This is about Havant, the issues facing the residents of St Faiths, the issues facing the wider borough, and the performance of the council which exists to serve us and on which you hope to serve. This is also about the future. You should assume that matters associated with the impact of the current pandemic have now become business as usual, and the council's focus is fully on the day-to-day business of running the borough. So without any further ado, I'm going to start. I'll start with you, Imogen. You have 2 minutes to go over that introduction.
Okay, so hi, I'm Imogen. I first moved to Havant when I was 3 months old, and I'm actually the 4th generation from Havant on my dad's side, with my great-grandparents moving here in the late 40s. So I went to nursery at the Palin, I was baptised at St Joseph's Church, and I went to St Thomas More's Primary School. I've decided to stand in this election because I believe it is important to have young people involved in the community. And if I was selected as your councillor for St Faiths, I would be a strong advocate for these people in the community. And I also have the passion and drive to advocate for all residents in the ward and would campaign on their behalf to achieve the best for them. I am dedicated and committed, and I'm not afraid to stand up for what I believe in. And I'm qualified to be your local councillor because I live in the area and one of many generations who have, and I really do care about St Faiths. I do have political experience, which means I should hopefully know how to navigate the local council. And I'm also a keen and quick learner who is prepared to do what it takes to achieve the desired outcome. I have a degree in business, focusing in finance, accounting, and business law, and I would use this to help understand the challenges faced by local businesses, particularly in the high street. And I have a lot of experience in dealing with community groups and problem solving, and look forward to applying these to local council as well. Day to day, some of the issues that I am concerned about and what I've heard about from residents in St Faiths is the lack of parking, particularly around the station. And as your local councillor, I'd be campaigning strongly for the regeneration of the high street. There's also issues such as the Portsmouth water development, which I'm concerned about, and how this will impact on traffic and residents. And there's the long-standing issue of the Warblington footbridge, which I'm passionate about getting built. Day to day, I work for the local MP, which gives me extensive knowledge of local issues. And I'm also the chairman of a local community group, which helped over 300 households in the peak of the pandemic. And I'm also a school governor at Fairfield Infant School. Generally, I'm available weekends and evenings.
I'm going to be fairly ruthless over time, but thanks, Imogen. Thanks for that. Phil, over to you. 2 minutes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for inviting me. I'm Phil Monday. I'm standing for Labour in St Faiths. I've lived in St Faiths for over 40 years. My children grew up in this area, all 4 of them. They went to the local schools, Bosmere, Fairfield, Warblington. For my career, I've been a teacher for 42 years. The latter 17 years of that, I was a head teacher. So I've got experience of running a budget of several £1 million. And I've had experience of managing quite a lot of people, including quite a lot of interesting 16-year-olds. So I've got some experience of managing people. Now I've retired, I want to put something back into my community. I love living in Havant. I think it's a great place. I think our council has not always done the best for it, and sometimes actually made things worse. And I think they need to be held to account. And I think I've got the skills and background to be able to do that. I think the specific issues I think are very important. The first is infrastructure. We're building loads of houses, and the existing residents have a right to expect that we put them first. So we need to think about the impact of the housing on things like roads, schools, and health centres, and make sure we've got that right at the beginning, not at the end of the process. Secondly, I think we need to concentrate on social housing for the people who are the 2,000 people who are on our housing waiting list. They should have access to the houses that are being built. We should not be building houses for people to come from outside if we can't actually deal with the people who are already on our list. Thirdly, I think there's environmental issues that need to be dealt with. I'm amazed that we've got so many houses being built and we haven't even got solar panels on, the vast majority of them. We must do more about that. And lastly, I think we need to make Havant a tidier and better place. And that involves things like looking after children's play areas and making sure they've got, looking after children's play areas, and also things like. All right, thank you.
I'm sticking the same rule for everybody.
Fine.
Okay, Faith, over to you.
Thank you. I retired from council 3 years ago after 12 years. Because council was changing from a public service to a business, from a working relationship with officers to one where some appear to see councillors as a necessary evil. Now decisions are barely challenged. I can stand by no longer. I've served my community all my life. I chair the Emsworth Show, overseeing its move in 2019 and planning this year to welcome visitors safely. In 2017, as mayor, I started the Havant Music Festival, and I'm delighted that there will be 4 live concerts at the end of June. We're working on the 5th festival with 16 concerts next April. We are currently clearing our large Victorian home in Emsworth after 42 years to move to a small home in the centre of Havant. Luckily, I'm a night owl needing little sleep. As a councillor, I average 15 hours a week on council work. I love Havant, hence the coming move. There is so much I value here: the gazebo garden, the Spring Arts Centre, the Billy Trail, and just sitting in the park on summer evenings listening to bat on ball. But Havant town does not have enough independent shops and evening attractions. We could do much more to encourage visitors to Havant, situated as it is on the ancient Roman crossroads leading to Chichester, the New Forest, the Downs, and historic Portsmouth. The main issues facing Havant Borough are not just financial, but moulding a future which has to take account of accelerating climate change. Lockdown has changed priorities for many. We need local jobs, leisure facilities, and shops instead of outlying estates on the edge, making cars almost a necessity with associated air pollution and gridlock. The council has to find ways to enhance our towns and communities whilst avoiding concreting over every available green space. They must improve the quality of life for every resident.
Thank you, Faith. Spot on. Shelley, over to you.
Thank you. So I have decided to stand for this election because as a long-standing member of this community of 44 years, when I walk around the town, I'm increasingly disheartened by the local government's endless pursuit of economic growth and poor planning decisions that have really carved up the town that I love. I've voted for the Green Party for a number of years now because we need to put people and the environment at the forefront of every decision. I feel highly motivated to push this change on the agenda. I've recently retired, I know I look very young, from the parochial church council of St Faiths Church, where I served 6 years on the PCC and 4 years as treasurer. So I do have good experience in budget and finance management. My retirement has freed up all of my spare time, basically. Whilst I am currently in full-time employment, I am sadly being made redundant in the next couple of months, and this will allow me a considerable amount of time to dedicate and focus on local community action, since I hope to take a break from paid employment. I feel qualified to represent St Faiths residents because, as mentioned, I've already served the St Faiths community for the last 6 years. However, as a member of the St Faiths Council ward community, I reckon that there are far wider issues in our community that need resolving. I experience them myself every day. I won't pretend to know the detail of every issue, but what impacts you impacts me as your neighbour. From the corporate world, I bring strong skills and capabilities in strategic thinking and planning, community engagement, project management, vendor management, and a huge amount of empathy, all of which would be a huge asset to the local community if I were elected. I believe the main issues facing Havant Borough today are lack of accountability and leadership in sustainable development, houses, space. Done?
Sorry, that's it, 2 minutes.
Oh, okay.
I'm keeping to the rules. So it's a bit of practice for the questions when we come up with the questions. Thank you for those introductions, all very helpful. Right, now there are 4 questions. Well, there may be 4 questions. You'll have 2 minutes each to give your response, and the order of response. Oh, Faith Ponsonby has dropped out. Just pause a moment. Faith, are you there?
She is.
Yep.
Yep.
Are you back, Faith?
Yes, I'm back, I think. Sorry, I don't know what
Okay.
happened there.
Right, I'm just going to introduce the questions. There's 4 questions, and you'll have 2 minutes each to give your response to the questions. And the order of the responses will change so that you'll each get a chance, the unlucky chance of answering a question first. We'll rotate through. We'll not always rotate in the same sequence, we'll go forwards and backwards down the order on the voting slip. Simply so we don't want to make sure that you're always following the same person. There is some science behind the randomness, which I can explain if you have a problem with it. But first of all, The first question we have is one that interested a lot of people. It's this: there have been a lot of posts on local community Facebook pages about antisocial behaviour among young people. The last year has been understandably hard for children and young people. What will you commit to doing for children and young people in St Faiths if you're elected? I'm going to ask Phil to answer that first.
Right, thank you. I think there's a concern about the lack of opportunities for young people to meet together. And I think that involves working with the local schools. I happen to have a very close link with Warblington School because the head teacher used to work for me. So I would be working with them to try and increase the opportunities that exist. I think the second thing is that I think we need to involve them more actively in what's going on in the community. Now, an example of that would be we're not being given the opportunity to comment on many of the things that are going on in our council. But I think if we had meetings and enabled and encouraged young people to be part of that, we could make a big difference. I also think we should be going into colleges. And I've actually made a contact with Havant College because I wanted to encourage young people to get registered to vote. And I think that's also important. For me personally, I would be working with Warblington School. I've offered to be a mentor to some of their students who find it more difficult. I was in there helping with the testing, the PCR testing, the lateral flow testing, actually it was, earlier this month. I think that's all I want to say on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Phil. Imogen, would you like to have a crack?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I've lost the screen here. Yep. Okay, so I think first of all, it would be beneficial as a young person myself to be able to reach out to a lot of these youth, and I could use this to liaise with them as well as what Phil said, the local schools. I have previously and still currently am been involved in a local task force. This one wasn't for St Faiths specifically, but it brought in members from local schools and community groups such as Motivate, Off the Record, some of the council housing departments and the police. And I have been involved in this, and it's been quite beneficial as a way of information sharing to talk about ways that we can tackle ASB in the community. So I could apply these skills and things that I've learned from that task force. And as well, I think being a school governor, I've sort of developed a bit of understanding of the way the school system works and, the processes involved. So I could use this as well to be tackling problems with youth.
Okay.
So yeah, that's from me.
You're all causing me to have to reset my time in that. Okay, thanks for that. Faith, you have 2 minutes now.
Right. I was a former group scout leader, so I know quite a lot about young people, having taken them on camps and things like that. And I always try and engage with young people whenever I go out. I remember meeting some kids around the Lee Park Community Centre who were clambering on roofs and things like that. And so I got them down and we talked about where they could go, what they wanted to do. They were playing this new sport of parkour, which is where you jump around railings and things like that. And they were longing to have somewhere where they could do this. We've got the skateboard parks, but we haven't sort of really moved on for things. I've engaged with the original place up in Lee Park, and again, we've lost most of our youth workers, and this is a county issue really, but it is tragic that we've the uniformed organisations do a really good job, the Scouts, the Air Cadets, the Army Cadets and the Police Cadets, but they don't do very enough really, and a lot of young people don't want to join that sort of organisation. They just want drop-in places. So I'd try to find areas, ways in which we could start these off, but you need volunteers, and volunteers are hard to come by. And it's one of the things that I think we have had at the council, meetings where we brought people in to ask questions. They've even had a vote where they voted for a charity to do things, and that's very good, but it's only once a year. I think there's much, much more. We should have a youth council and a youth parliament going, sending people up to the youth parliament and get people involved in politics so they can see what a difference it can make. We've got wonderful organisations like Dynamo Youth Theatre, and people who go to that are great. But we've got to reach out to the ones who don't want to engage in organised activity.
Thank you, Faith.
Okay.
Yep. Thanks, Shelley. Your turn.
Thank you. So I think it's important to say I don't have a huge amount of experience in youth work or children and young people, but what I can commit to is the fact that from my experience in engaging with people within the corporate world, who are often younger than myself in the industry that I've been in, I do take the time to understand what the motivation is for the behaviour and how we fix the root cause. So clearly, from the groups that have been mentioned that are in place from the previous candidates, people are slipping through the gaps. They don't know where to go for support, they don't want support, or they're not being identified as needing support. So I can commit to seek to understand what's driving that behaviour and where those issues are taking place.
Thank you, Shelley. 4 interesting responses to the first question. So let me get queued up ready for the second question. Second question is, as our local councillor, what will you do to help prevent the continued destruction of our borough's green spaces, trees and hedgerows by the construction of unsuitable new housing developments? Imogen, could you take that one first?
Yeah, sure. So I am in favour of sustainable development. I don't think that we need unnecessary development in the area, but there is still a need for housing. As a young person myself, wanting to get on the housing ladder, that I do think that is important. But as you mentioned, we don't want destruction of our green spaces and things like that. So I think it's very important to consult with local residents to see what they want on the issue. I have recently put out a survey and I have been in touch with a lot of St Faiths residents who have conveyed this back to me. So I think it's very important to be on council as an advocate for protecting the environment, and that is something I can pledge to do. It's also important to work with the officers at the council and to make sure it isn't just a matter of pushing through development. And I think there has been some cases of that in the past, and I think it is something that needs standing up for.
Thank you, Imogen. Okay, reset my little clock again. The next victim is Phil.
Hey, well, first of all, I do have concerns about the level of housing that we have accepted as a council. I think when you look at other councils that have much more space around them, I am concerned that our council actually rolled over on this a bit too easily. I think we've got a too high a target to start with. I also think there's issues about housing density. I mean, if you are going to use a site like, for example, Southley, I don't see why in this day and age we shouldn't be considering 3-storey buildings or even 4-storey buildings, because I think we use less land that way and we keep some of the green space, which is absolutely vital that we do that. I think we also need to look when we build things to build in those green spaces and make something of them. So, for example, it's really sad that you look at Old Cops Road and the play area there is effectively completely ruined. You would not take a small child to it looking at it. It's dirty, it's got no fences, and so we've got to do more with the green spaces we've got to make them more accessible. And I think part of that will actually help young people to understand and value their green spaces. So it's about reducing the amount of housing as much as we can, about looking after the green spaces that we've got, and it's about educating people to use those. And it is really encouraging that during this lockdown, when you go for a walk, you actually see a lot of people, quite a few of whom I've never seen before, because people are actually realizing that we've got this asset and actually wanting to use it. Thank you.
Thanks, Phil. Shelley.
Yeah, sure. So firstly, I would be pushing for more development on brownfield sites, not green sites. I don't think we have many green sites left in Havant. They've already been built on, unfortunately, which is very sad. I think we should be challenging the council to look at developments such as the New Lane, 32 Lane site, and looking at different opportunities for that site, such as the old Colt site where there are houses being built. On the green space side, I think there needs to be far more scrutiny on the applications for building. It seems that notices are sent to local stakeholders to respond to their applications, but there doesn't seem to be a lot of scrutiny on those answers. And also the follow-up on where houses are built on the green spaces doesn't seem to be in place. Certain measures are put in place for harvesting water, recycling, etc. But those never seem to come to fruition if you look at a new site. So I certainly would be pushing the agenda for sustainable development, making sure that where we do need to build houses, that they are built in the right place with the right infrastructure.
Thank you, Shelley. Which leaves one more, which is Faith.
Right, yes. Housing is always a difficult problem because we have young people who are desperate to get into houses. And if you look at the cost of houses, even in Havant and Emsworth and even in Lee Park, you're talking several £100,000 that people have got to do. So we do need houses, but they don't have to be necessarily on the green spaces. And I go along with Shelley and say there are brownfield sites which can be used. And also, I think we need to consider building a new town somewhere out where you can then put in all the infrastructure. You can put in the schools and everything else. In the new development up in Denvilles, they're telling me that they have to go quite a long way to get to schools. There's no bus. I think there's a bus twice a day or something like that, which comes down South Lee Road. And so they've almost got to get, either if they don't cycle, which with small children can be difficult, they have got to, there's no infrastructure there for them to automatically sort of be able to relax and have a good family life. The other thing that really concerns me is some of the construction people, when they don't conform to the conditions that have been put on as far as trees and hedges go. It is tragic that in Emsworth we've lost some hedges, and in other places too. I know that they will fell trees in the middle of the night, and sometimes people notice and do it. Our enforcement on the council is not good. They have employed some further enforcement officers, but there needs to be much better follow-up to see to that. I'm very concerned about affordable housing because inevitably when you get a development and they have 30% have to be affordable if it's over a certain size, the affordable housing is always pushed to the furthest part of the development, the closest to the railways and everything
I'm going to have to stop you there, Faith. Thank you very much.
Go on for hours.
No comment. Right. Question number 3. Question number 3, actually, Faith, due to a trick of my spreadsheet here, you're going to be able to go on for hours because I'm going to give you the next question first.
Right, good.
And that is, Havant Borough Council Head of Regeneration asked Havant Civic Society to suggest improvements which could be made to the town centre. This was part of a conversation that I had with her over the regeneration strategies failure to deliver in its first incarnation, and it's now being reincarnated as Civic Plaza Plus. Now that Havant Borough Council own the Civic Plaza site, the Meridian Centre and the Bullbeck Road multi-storey car park, what do you believe that council should do with those assets?
it's difficult to know exactly what we're going to do with them. Where, again, I don't think the council should be a business. We should get people in who know what they're doing. Meridian Centre is great, but when I think of what it replaced, the little individual shops we all loved in Market Parade, the China shop, the toy shop, things like that, that was lovely. And I think that is a suggestion that on the East Street development, there might be some sort of provision for independent shops. I think I mentioned this before. We need more independent shops, which people are attracted to come and spend a day in Havant shopping, wandering around the shops, which leads you on to parking. And I'm glad now that there is some easing up of parking, but we have to enable people to park. Okay, we've got to pay, but to park their cars within easy reach of the shops at not too expensive a time. An awful lot of people park in Tesco's in Solent Road and then walk across to the town centre and then have to get back quickly. The other thing I think that we need to do is to encourage, again, I was pleased to see in the East Street development, there is some flats, because the more younger people we have, and it's usually younger people living in flats initially, the better the town centre entertainments are going to be. The more people will want to pop out to restaurants. Sadly, some of the restaurants that have tried to set up in here have failed. And I once used a term at a council meeting that Havant was a ghost town after 6 o'clock at night. We need to get a much more lively environment for residents to come into, to want to come into and enjoy in the evening. And there's lots we can do to encourage them. The Bulbeck Road one is a difficult one. Right.
Next up, Shelley.
Okay, thank you. So I think, you know, that's a very broad question. There's quite a lot that you could answer to that, but fundamentally, I believe that Havant Borough Council need to wind the clock back and look at their strategic priorities for regeneration, because looking at them now, they were developed pre-COVID, pre-Brexit, developed before the climate crisis was really becoming an agenda item that should be there at the top. And actually, the top priority was people have a varied selection of housing that meets their needs. That doesn't need to be in the town centre. So I'm not, you know, fully aligned to the priorities and the order that they're in. I don't believe they should go through the town with a wrecking ball and build this wonderful new whatever it was in that lovely video that cost about 70 grand, I think, to make. I can't remember. But I believe they should try and reuse what we already have and make the best of what we already have. There's a lot of resources already in the town. There's a lot of community space already in the town that could be used. And it just takes a bit of engagement with local businesses, local pubs, community centres, restaurants. I know we don't have many restaurants, but a bit of encouragement to grow and nurture the businesses in Havant could easily achieve those regeneration goals without taking a wrecking ball through the town.
Thank you, Shelley. Next up, Phil.
Thank you. Right, well, certainly in terms of the Meridian Centre, if you look at some of the more modern centres, what they've tended to do is have a much scaled down mall going through it, which has got smaller shops, and then building over it a load of flats. Because if you're talking about not using so much greenfield sites, you've got to use the opportunities that you've got in the town centre. So you could build a series of flats above a mall, and that's done in a number of places. I mean, a good example would be Walton-on-Thames, where they've done just that, and it's a much more pleasant environment to shop in. I think we've got to look at this from the point of view of reducing the number of greenfield sites we use, putting more people in the town centres, so you make the town centres more living places where there are people coming and going at all times. What Faith said about it being a ghost town, I think that's absolutely right. It's beginning to get a bit better, I think, but I think that was a real problem for it. Bulbeck Road seems to me it's not used very much as a car park. I mean, certainly all 5 levels of it are not used most of the time, so there will be an opportunity there again to build on top of the car parking to provide some more flat opportunities. I would reduce the cost of parking, because I think it's really important we support our traders, and particularly at this stage when shopping habits might reform in a different way. I would personally have free parking for 6 months, just to encourage people to go and use the local shops.
Yeah.
I like the idea of food festival. Emsworth had a food festival that was stunning. Now they stopped it because their residents didn't like it, but I think in Havant it would have the potential to really bring people in. And we do have Havant Park, which is a very attractive park. Okay, thank you.
Imogen, back to you.
Yeah, so I mean, some of the things I'm about to say have already been said, but I definitely think we do need to start attracting newer and exciting shops and cafes and restaurants to the town centre. I think that would get people in, get them spending, and bring a bit more life to the town centre. I know that the council currently do put in for bids such as the Town Fund and the High Street, and I think Havant Town Centre has a very good case for them. So it would be great to be able to utilise this to bring about regeneration. As mentioned, so parking is an issue around the town centre, and often that can lead people to just avoiding the town and going to the smaller shops, which is great in some cases, but really we do want them there spending money and supporting these local businesses. So particularly with the Bulbeck and the parking there, I know that there is a bit of a cost associated to it, but that is something we could look at. If it's not being fully utilised and it is too expensive, then we need to be talking to residents to see what it is they'd be willing to pay and how we get them back to the town centre.
Okay, thank you. Right, question number 4 is it's a bit of a trick. It's a 2-part question, but the first part is actually very short. It's a 1-word answer. So the first part of this question, when it comes to you, is, are you an active cycle user? Yes or no? It goes on. The lack of effective traffic management and the consequent risk to the safety of pedestrians, cyclists, and the residents of local streets has come into sharp focus with the current new lane planning application. Havant residents seek a safer, greener balance between motor vehicle, bicycle, and pedestrian traffic. Do you agree with them? And if so, how should Havant Borough Council deliver the change required? And I'm going to start here with Shelley.
Well, I've adjusted my camera to see the photo above me. Yes, we are a household of active cyclists. I'm not personally at the moment because I've just had a back operation, so hoping to get back out on the bike soon. Well, I could go on for hours about the new lane development and the risks and the impact on the environment that will bring. Fundamentally, my biggest concern is the sheer amount of traffic that's going to bring through the town, through the surrounding areas. It's just going to be detrimental not only to our health, but to the safety of other road users. In addition, I think we should be really discouraging internet buying. Just my own personal view, I'm sure, but we need to get back to the high street and get back to being able to buy stuff locally, being able to walk into town, cycle into town, leave the car parked up at the weekend. So personally, for me, this is high on my agenda. Regardless of the election outcome, it's something that personally I'm very passionate about finding a solution to and taking action on.
Thank you very much, Shelley.
Change my camera now.
Yes. you know there's a byproduct of you saving so much time here.
Get the other questions.
Yes, we worked that out. Yeah, we worked that out.
Over to you, Faith.
Right, I'm afraid I'm not a cyclist. I grew up in central London on a hill, and I really wasn't even allowed to have a cycle because it was dangerous, and I've never taken to it, but I do walk a lot. And one of the reasons for moving into central Havant is that even when I'm on a Zimmer frame, which may not be far off, I will be able to get to the shops and get to the station and get to the Spring Theatre, which will be great. So the problem with traffic is you have many of these new ones coming in. I mean, people cycle through the pedestrian precinct, which is dangerous because you can't necessarily hear them. These e-scooters are another problem that are coming in, and I have to say, even elderly mobile things. There's senior moment, what they call, but anyway, and they can be quite dangerous because they come up behind you, and I've known people who have been hurt by them. So traffic of all kinds is potentially very dangerous. What bothers me in the wider scale is the gridlock we get when the A27 is shut and Havant completely snarls up. Completely every time that happens. We haven't fortunately had too much recently, but even so, it is still there. The other thing that you have to have is the planning appeals and the knock-on effect of the lorries going through unsuitable streets. We've had that in Lee Park going along Purbrook Way, Middle Parkway. I've even seen lorries from New Lane trying to cross over the level crossing by Fairfield School. When you think of those narrow roads, it is terrible. So our signposting needs to be really, really good. They are there, but people don't necessarily see them.
Thank you, Faith.
I told you I'd go on for hours.
Yeah, true to your word. Phil, over to you.
Thanks. Well, I am an active cyclist, not a very regular cyclist, but I did the London to Brighton cycle ride about 6 years ago. So I suppose I could claim I'm a cyclist. I certainly cycle with my grandchildren, so I'm very conscious of the health and safety issues. I think I'm quite worried about, particularly about the development on the old Pfizer site, because I think the traffic that will bring to the centre of Havant is horrendous. And I mean, if you just talk about the air pollution that will cause, I think it's absolutely a no-no. And what I cannot understand is we have a council that has and is developing sites at Dunsbury Farm and also at the bottom end of Brockhampton Lane, both of which could take any lorries straight onto motorways or big trunk roads without any need to actually go through residential areas. And in the pre-planning stage, I really wonder whether the council made this clear enough. And that's exactly what I'm worried about with this council. It actually fails to be proactive. It allows things to happen, and then afterwards there's a problem, and then they say, oh yes, there's a problem. Oh, I'm sorry that happened. We'll try and do something about it, where they could do something by being ahead of the game. So I think that's really important. In terms of, there are other issues like, for example, the Southleigh development. And I mean, there is a plan for nice cycle routes through there, which is great. But if they don't build the relief roads that they're talking about, and at the moment, the plan through the council, the development plan does not, the housing plan does not actually include that road. It says it might be built, but it doesn't say it necessarily is. Now, I think it's really important that it is built. And I think it's really important that these things are built and planned right from the beginning. Thank you.
Imogen.
Yes, so I am not a cyclist. I can't remember the last time I have been on a bike, but it probably is something I should look at getting back into to get a little bit healthier. But I do a lot of walking. So I walk along New Lane and all around there quite regularly to get into the town centre. So I know specifically with the Pfizer development, and I have been in touch with local councillors, as Tim Pike, who's a current councillor for St Faiths, as well as Councillor Rennie. And I've been asking them, what are they doing about the current situation? So it does go to the planning committee next month, I've been told, and that they are working closely with the developers and trying to find the best outcome and how we can mitigate the traffic there. They have pinpointed, and it is something I've raised to their attention as well, that specifically that junction with New Lane and Crossland Drive, that is an area we need to look at. We need to ensure that we're routing the traffic properly and that we are protecting the pedestrians safely there. So if I was to be local councillor, I would continue my discussions with them as well as the developers to try and figure out what we can do to make sure it's as safe as possible for pedestrians like me, as well as cyclists and road users in general.
Thanks, Imogen. Well, that's the end of the fourth question, but I have to say that since you've all been so good as far as timekeeping goes, I'm going to throw in a fifth question, since we have time. The unplanned fifth question, and you can be as short as you like on this. You don't have to take anywhere close to 2 minutes. Just messing with my timer here. Right, the question is, do you feel that being the local representative of a national party will help you to do the job as councillor for St Faiths? And if so, why? We'll start with Shelley.
Yeah, absolutely. I do feel that, because I have strong feelings about the policies of the Green Party. You know, they are very much focused on well-being development for the future. And I think a lot of that we can leverage very well in the St Faiths ward. They've already shown across the country that they can deploy and take action very effectively in the wards where they do have councillors. And I think it's time to give the Green Party the opportunity to do that in Havant.
Thanks, Shelley. Short and sweet. Right, over to Faith.
Right. I've had a lot of experience with the local government association and the Liberal Democrat group on that, and they have tremendous information, stocks of information and training courses that they can give you as advice. I'm a great conference goer. I love going to our national conference. I've spoken at almost every conference for the last 5 years about issues in Havant. I last spoke recently because there was an education motion about the effect of COVID on education, and I said that it was mainly thinking of school children. I said we needed to consider nursery education, which has suffered really badly. As I know, as a trustee of a group of nurseries up in Lee Park, it's suffered badly. And also the university students and their final year school students who are suffering. I've got grandchildren in that category too, who are really suffering. My grandson, who's about to be 18, is taking his A-levels this year. So there's a lot that you can gain from going to conference, meeting people at conference, talking to developers at conference sometimes, if they are attending, at the exhibition and the fringe. And I always go, if I can, round, and I bring up issues about Havant with them and try and find out more information how I can help. So I'm a great believer in that, and the benefits do come back, because the music festival, for instance, I have talked about frequently, and the lovely urban vocal group and music fusion at the Spring. I've talked about several times at conference about the wonderful work they're doing in promoting music for mental health. So there's lots one can gain from one's national party and the policies and the way you can have a say in them. I've been a Liberal Democrat now for 60 years, and the words in
I'm up, Faith. Okay, Phil.
Okay, thanks. Well, I think, yes, it's good that we align to parties, because I think it helps the voters to know where we're coming from. In other words, it gives a bit more information about the person that you're voting for. That you want to find out about that person, but you also want to find out about that person's value system. And I think that's important. So, for example, in my case, I mean, the Labour Party for me matters because I really believe in a more equal society than we've got at the moment. I think that's really important. So if I was a councillor, I would be focusing particularly on making sure we tackle the issue of social housing and the people on the streets. And those are really important things to me, and they would be things that I would work on if I was a councillor. I think also there's just simple little things like, for example, if you don't have a car and you're on a minimum wage and you've got an old fridge that you want to get rid of, and it's going to cost you money, you may put it in your front garden and hoping that you've got a friend who's going to turn up eventually and help you to put it in their car and take it to the tip. Or you may get somebody who'll fly tip it. And we need to think about those people. And for example, I think we need to do some free collections for large items from some areas of the town, so that we actually help people who are not that well off. And you can look at all sorts of ways where that is true. And I think that's why I think it's important that we are clear where we come from and what values we have. Can't hear you, Bob. You put yourself on.
I've done it. I've done it. Somebody had to do it, and it had to be me. Thanks a lot, Phil. And Imogen, over to you.
Yeah, so I am running as the Conservative candidate, and I do resonate with a lot of the policies and the values of the Conservative Party. But I do think where this is a local level, it's important that we're not taking a national agenda. I mean, you said so in your questions, to not bring the national agenda to this meeting. And I think that's very important too, that we are there to represent St Faiths and the local community. And that's what I look to do. I'd be looking to work with people from any party and, working with them. As long as our values align, that we're doing good for people, then I think that's what's important in a candidate and a councillor. So that's what I would look to bring.
Imogen, thanks very much. Okay, now, well, on behalf of the St Faiths residents and the Havant Civic Society members, and I think I probably speak for the committee, thank you all very much, because I think you've given a pretty good show. I'm impressed with the level of the quality of the four candidates. Now, I'm just going to try and give you your homework now, because I said at the beginning that there were some questions that we missed here. So let me try and share.
That's why I signed up to homework.
Well, you don't have to do the homework. But there were three questions in particular that we thought we would set. It's up to you whether you want to go with it. When this appears on YouTube tomorrow, these three questions, and if you want to put comments against them, we'd be certainly interested in your thoughts. So the first one, do you think that the new housing development sites in the Havant local plan to 2036 should be approved by the planning committee before the plan has been agreed by the planning inspector? Now, you can have all the time in the world to answer that. There's no 2-minute limit. The next question, what action, it's really two questions. What action would you take to improve the water quality of Langstone and Chichester harbours, given that untreated sewage is regularly released into the harbours? And do you think it's right that wastewater is treated by a private monopoly such as Southern Water, where profit motives may conflict with public health? Okay, I will email these questions to all four of you immediately after this session. And the last one is, how would each candidate respond to the opinion or statement that it's the property developers, vested interests and lobbyists in central government who now govern what happens in Havant, not the residents or the elected councillors? So that's food for thought. I'll email these to you all. Once again, thank you very much for your participation. Thank you for agreeing to do this. It's been, from my perspective, fun, and I'm sure that all of the residents and voters will appreciate it. So thank you very much. Shirley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, sorry. So you want us to respond to these questions on email?
On YouTube. But
YouTube.
This video will be on the HCS website late tonight or very first thing in the morning. The video will be on YouTube. If you want to leave, I'll leave a comment with these questions in against the video. If you'd like to add your own dialogue to those comments, it will be interesting to hear what you all think.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Right.
Thanks for organising, Bob.
Yes, thank you.
Thank
It's
you.
been
Thank
really
you,
great.
thank you very
It's been
much.
a pleasure, and thank you very much
to
for
all
doing
the
it.
candidates.
Good luck, everyone.
Thank you, and good luck to you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Good night,
Cheers.
everybody.
Good night.
Bye then.